Hi, my name is Molly, and I'm here with Claire and Bailey, and we're going to go over how HIPAA relates to your role in Dr. Osier's lab. So this is basically just going over, you probably know what HIPAA is, and you probably are very compliant with it, but we just want to talk about how it relates to the lab and how we'll be utilizing some protected health information and how not to violate HIPAA so that we can be compliant and have a great study.
Hi, this is Claire here. So as Molly was saying, we're going to be going over HIPAA, and one of the things we wanted to emphasize to you is what exactly the acronym spells out. It is HIPAA with 2 A's, not HIPAA with 2 P's, like this poor hippo down there. He's like, I want to be kept out of this. So basically what HIPAA is, it's the official U.S. policies that promote privacy and security of health information. So this is to protect the patient because we want to make sure like no information is stolen and like no information gets out that the patient does not want out, whether that be to maybe certain members of their family or friends, or maybe to like the business that they work at or anything along those lines. So we really want to make sure that these patients' information does not get out.
Hey y'all, Bailey here. When thinking about HIPAA, it's important to keep in mind the golden rule. It's pretty much a universal thing people all value in various cultures, religions, and stuff. So keeping in mind, like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or, treat others how you'd like to be treated. Just keep that in mind. If you were in the hospital with some sort of serious health thing going on, you probably wouldn't want everyone knowing, like, Bailey Snow had this going on with all of your information. So just keep their information private, like you'd hope that they would keep your information private.
And so what HIPAA actually protects is this list right here, Protected Health Information, PHI. So it's not always obvious. Some things are a little more common sense, like names, date of birth, things like that. But even admission date and discharge date, those can be identifiable characteristics of a patient. So you don't want to say those things, or you want to make sure that you're protecting that information of the patient. And these things that we've highlighted in purple are things that we'll be definitely dealing with in our particular study. So just pay close attention to those. And like I said, admission date, that's not so common sense. Yeah.
And so the IRB has approved information that we are allowed to collect from these patients, and we have links here as to what we are approved and then what we have participants sign. So the information that we have been approved to collect includes subject names, their phone numbers, their email address, and then the dates at which they were admitted. So if you want to look at more of that, you can click on these links.
So these are the most common violations of HIPAA or breaches in the personal private health information, the most common being physical theft, 49% of the time. So that could include, like, maybe you're accessing their health information from a computer and that computer is stolen. So that would be a case in which protected health information was violated through physical theft. So don't step away from the laptop, don't leave the laptop unattended, don't leave the login open on the laptop and step away from it for any reason. Keep it with you, keep it safe and protected. It's going to be over there in the Philomena building, which is a locked building. So leaving it overnight, it is locked. But if you're there during the day and you walk away, just make sure you're at least logged out. Unauthorized access or disclosure is another way in which HIPAA is violated. So that would be going into a chart that we don't necessarily have the authorization to go into. So if our search criteria or our patient inclusion criteria is ages 6 to 12 and you open up a chart of a 2-year-old, that would be unauthorized access. So that would be a violation of HIPAA. Physical loss would be, say you wrote something down on a sticky note and then you lost that sticky note, or you threw that sticky note away in the trash can and it had protected health information on it. That would be a violation. It also could be stolen, so that would be another physical theft example. So there really probably isn't a reason to be writing anything down, but if it is necessary, we'll talk later about various places where you can have that paper with the protected health information shredded. Hacking IT, another way It kind of falls under physical theft. If the computer was stolen, we need to report that immediately. Again, logging off, don't autosave your password, don't share your password with other people, even if you trust them. There's no reason to be sharing it. And then improper disposal is, again, kind of like if you had something written down and you were to throw it away in the regular trash rather than a shred bin.
Okay, so this is just kind of describing where you might want to be screening to make sure that no one can see you or see your laptop screen. So in this picture to the right of the slide, you can see all these different people in a public area that anyone can walk by and see their screens, except for that one person in the corner. So no one can walk behind them. No one can see their screen. They're the only ones that can see it. So that's the type of situation you want to put yourself in if you're screening in public, where no one else can possibly see your screen. It's also a good practice, if you have one or if you can get one, to use a privacy filter on your computer that can help protect your patient information.
So this is our screening process. Whenever you are screening while you're at DCMC, you are going to be looking at the charts of everybody who's in there. They will bring up some basic information that you can look at to where you can decide whether or not that is a chart that you need to open. So it's going to have room numbers, name, their MRN number, their age, their gender, as well as how long they've been there for, and as well as it says attending physician, and then the reason why they're there. So the things we care about have they gotten to the emergency department within the last 23 hours? Because we want to make sure that we are collecting their blood within that 24-hour window. The next would be a reason for visit. If you are looking at the chart and you see that it says diverticulitis, that is not associated with any kind of head injury. So that would be a chart that you would not want to click on. If it were something to say something a little bit more ambiguous, like a fall or like a car accident, that would be a reason where maybe you would need to go into the chart and further investigate whether or not their head had sustained the injury. But if you were to go in and see maybe they broke their arm, then that would be something where you would need to get out of the chart. And then also you would look at the age range. They need to be within the 6 to 12 years old. And so if they are not, then that is not a reason why you need to click on that. And then once you've opened the patient record to confirm their eligibility, you need to make sure there's no exclusion criteria present. So like I said, if it said they were involved in a car accident, but then you looked in the chart and you saw that they sustained no head injury, they just broke their arm, then that would be considered something that you need to get out of. And then you need to make sure that all the inclusion criteria is met, and then that there's also no evidence of imminent death, because with these, the parents are probably going to be very distraught if they're hearing, that their child is completely brain dead and, there's no hope for recovery. So that would be a situation where we wouldn't want to go in the room and ask them that, because it's a very sensitive time and we don't want to disturb that. Okay. So the need to know basis for the EHR or electronic health record. So we need to make sure, again, to never open the patient record if the pre-screening census fails the 3 checks. So you're going to get some, if you haven't already taken these practice quizzes, it's going to be some quizzes where you practice looking at charts and figuring out which ones you open and which ones you don't. And then once you have screened the chart, you want to make sure that all the inclusion criteria is met and that there's no exclusion criteria, which we have a whole list of. And then you are never going to open a chart for your own curiosity, whether it be like an interesting case, like maybe you see like somebody is here because they have like a really interesting diagnosis or something you've never heard of, or maybe they're here for, some weird random like coincidence accident and you were like, oh my gosh, that looks interesting. We don't want to open that. Or if you see a name of somebody that looks like famous. So let's say, for instance, Macaulay Culkin is still like 8 years old at this time. Do not click on Macaulay Culkin's patient. Do not click on his. We don't even know that. Of course, he's a much older person now, so we don't need to click on him for any other reason. If you see a family or a friend name there, you really don't want to look at that. Even if they are your family member, you still do not have permission to look at their chart. And then even your own record. This was something that I didn't know about. Apparently, like if you have ever been at that hospital or been in maybe a Seton facility, like your chart would technically still be there, but that is something that you are not allowed to look at, even though it is your chart. So we want to make sure that we do not violate any of these.
So just to remember, we have a space next to DCMC in the Philomena building where we have access to a computer. There's even 3 screens. So you might be screening on one computer and studying for the MCAT or doing homework for your summer school class or whatever on the other screens. But keeping in mind, like, that building still, there could be people. So keeping in mind, logging out when you're done and all of that. But you can definitely go over there and screen if you'd like, as well as obviously the waiting rooms, the cafeteria, wherever you'd like to go, as long as you're keeping in mind keeping the private health information private. And then keeping in mind other technology taboos related to HIPAA. So saving PHI on your personal computer would not be appropriate. We have that shared computer we'll be using that has secure things on it to make sure we keep our protected health information secure, but your personal computer wouldn't have that. Again, writing anything down or a sticky note that you want to share with Dr. Osier wouldn't be appropriate. And if there ever was an appropriate time to write it down, keep in mind you need to be shredding that paper when you're done. Saving logins so that you can automatically log in is not appropriate because anybody could come on and click login and access the information through your account. Writing down your login information or sharing it with others is inappropriate. We are approved to be on the study, but your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your mom or your sister isn't, so they don't need to be having your login information and accessing protected health information through that. And you would be held liable if they were to do that because clearly there was a breach on your account. And then there shouldn't be any reason to save anything on a flash drive or a hard drive. We'll have that shared computer, so keep it within that. And then if anything were to be lost or stolen, we need to report that immediately. Dr. Osier is a great first person to go to on that, and we'll show you later on the slides her numbers there along with other people you can report things to. But I would always recommend starting with Dr. Osier. She'll have your back and she'll help you navigate how to deal with any sort of breach. And then just to emphasize one more time, don't forget to log off when you're done. But if you've ever been on a computer at a Seton facility or on Compass, there's a little green button that says Roam in the bottom left corner. If you click that, it logs you off, but it saves your screen. So when you come back to log back in, it'll bring up the exact same screen where you're just on, so you won't lose your spot or your progress or anything like that. So that's a really great resource to use if you're just running to the bathroom really quick or just running to the cafeteria really quick and you're going to be right back. Just press Roam instead of completely logging out.
Okay, and then as we kind of mentioned earlier, not sharing your passwords, but keeping them in a secure space. UT actually has something called Stash, which you can save all your passwords. It's free from my understanding, and it's a secure place to store your passwords. That's a great tool to use that you could use for your Seton login. And let's see, this is making sure, again, not to access electronic records that of like family, friends, things like that. I even had in my previous recruiter job, one of my coworkers was looking at a patient that had the same last name as her, not because they were related, but it was a potential patient that was going to be enrolled in our study. And Seton actually contacted her, asking her why she was looking at that patient, realizing that they had the same last name. So this is just kind of a reminder that Seton is watching what records you're opening, what patient charts you're opening, and to really stick to protocol and do not open family, friends, your own chart, because it will be documented. And unless you have a good reason of a potential person that you're looking for the study, where Dr. Osier can validate and get your back that you are looking at someone that is a good potential candidate, just make sure you're not looking at anyone that you're not supposed to be looking at.
All right, so let's say that you have accidentally clicked open the wrong chart. So this could happen because maybe you're going to click on this one patient and you accidentally click the one above or below it. So what you need to do is close out of it as soon as you possibly can, like as soon as you realize, oh no, I clicked on the wrong chart. Do not look through the chart at all. Do not be like looking through their information. And then make sure to let Dr. Osier know. So this can be through an email, or if it might be even faster to do a text if you have her number, but definitely use her email, and also do an exit survey. We promise that if you did accidentally open a patient chart, she's not going to yell at you. This is not something where you're going to be like punished and you're never allowed to go back to Dell Children's or something like that. It's just something where we want to know, because then when Seton comes and contacts us and says, why was this student in this chart? She can then have your back and say, this is why they were in there. And then there will be no punitive actions taken against you. So as Bailey was saying earlier, we do not want to write down anybody's PHI on like a sticky note, or maybe you have like a scrap piece of paper or something like that. Or like for me, I tend to write things I need to remember down on my hand. Don't do that. So if you must, make sure that if you, for some reason, you have to write this information down, like there's no other way around it, then you need to make sure that you never leave that note unattended, like just out in the open where anybody could look at it, or like in an area that's easily visible to other people. You do not want to leave it in your bag, because it could, fall out when you're taking things out, and then it gets left somewhere and somebody could pick it up. And then also we want to make sure to not dispose of it in normal trash, because it could be taken out of the trash. Someone could maybe see you throw it away and then go rummage through the trash later. We want to make sure that we put it in bins that are designated shredders, like this picture here. We want to make sure that we're put it in there, because then they shred all of these documents at the end of the day so that this information is not stolen.
All right, so talking about PHI, so say you're screening patients that are in the ER and you come upon somebody that meets all three of your initial inclusion criteria, and then you open their chart up and it appears as though they had a brain injury. You don't notice any exclusion criteria. You're super, super excited, and you call Dr. Osier and you want to tell her all about it so she can get over there and consent that patient to be in the study. Well, when you're calling her on the phone, it wouldn't be appropriate to say the patient's name or any of those protected health informations. That's why we use a Google form. So while you're screening the patient, you have a Google form up and you're filling that out as you go. So once you press submit and you've reached the conclusion that this person should be included in our study if they're willing, once you press submit, Dr. Osier has access to that, and she can see it on her secure screen rather than you telling her over the phone. So you could just simply tell her over the phone, I think I have somebody, I'd love for you to come over and check it out. And at that point, she can pull it up through the Google form and look at it without you having to say it out loud and risking somebody else overhearing what you're saying, somebody that might just be around and is completely unrelated to our study. So that could be over the phone, and it could also be in person. You're talking to somebody, say Dr. Osier is at Dell Children's at the time, and you want to tell her about it. Even though she's in person with you, you never know who's listening. So if you do need to talk about something in person, just make sure you're somewhere private where people aren't overhearing. You're talking in a low tone. And in that case, it might be appropriate to talk about it in person. And also just extra vigilant. It's really easy if maybe you're screening with a fellow screener and y'all are chatting about what's going on. It's not appropriate to talk in terms of protected health information. It can be really easy when you go to lunch in the cafeteria or you're in the elevator, but people are always listening. So just be careful and vigilant to be careful that you're not talking about protected health information. And then just the need to know basis. So again, if you're talking to Dr. Osier over the phone, keep in mind the minimum amount of PHI you have to share for people to be able to do their job well. Over the phone, it could just be there's somebody here. You should check out the Google form and look at what I found. In person, it might be, they're in room blank, but did you need to say their name and their phone number to give her that information? No, you didn't. And then just keeping in mind sharing information. It's not secure to share PHI over your personal Gmail account or anything like that. The Seton email is secure, but even then, there's probably not a reason for you to be emailing any protected health information whatsoever. So an example of the need to know language, hey, can you come by and approach this patient in the screening form? That's perfect. She can open up the screening form and say it without you having to be like, hey, Donald Duck is here and he got injured in an accident on 6/15/2018. You didn't need to say all that for her to figure out who you're talking about. She can just access the Google form. So keep it to the need to know lingo to the minimum amount that you can.
Okay, and this is just some for your information where HIPAA violations have been in the news. So in this article, it's going over how MD Anderson in Houston had to pay $4.3 million for their HIPAA violations. So happens all over the place, all the time, but we want to practice, we want to have good clinical practice and limit that. Again, jail time for HIPAA, that's a real thing. You can go to jail for HIPAA violations. So this is an article talking about that. And even a kind of famous one is Kate Middleton's hospital nurse, I believe after she delivered one of her kids. She was contacted, her nurse was contacted by someone that appeared to be a family member, and the nurse released some PHI on Kate Middleton and her child, and it actually was a news reporter of some sort, and so that nurse violated HIPAA on accident, and she actually committed suicide, which is very sad, because HIPAA violations are very serious, and so we don't want to violate, so that's what this training is all about.
All right, so we want to make sure, like Molly was saying, we do not want to violate HIPAA because we want to make Dr. Osier and UT very proud. We want to accomplish all these great, wonderful things with this study and get really good information that we can later publish and, like Dr. Osier said, get our Nobel Prize with. That is the goal. And if we violate HIPAA, then they probably will not try to nominate us for that Nobel Prize. So we really want to make sure we pay extra close attention to that. And then so friends don't ask friends to violate HIPAA. So even if like your best friend in the entire world or your boyfriend or girlfriend that you love so much is like amazing and they're like, I promise I won't tell anybody, like we do not want to tell them any PHI. I know it can be really tempting. Like if somebody, maybe you like see a chart and somebody has maybe the exact same name as you, or they have a phone number that literally goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. Maybe they live at a really cool address, or it is in fact a famous person. These are not things that you would want to share with them. And then like I had a situation where I had a patient on one of the floors of the hospital I was working at, and they were in the VIP room, and their name couldn't be given out to anybody because it was all blocked off because they were actually famous. And so that was one of my patients, and I could only talk about it with the nurse who was taking care of that patient, and then like the charge nurse on the floor who is aware of all the patients. So that's a situation where, I couldn't go home and like tell my friends about it or anything because it is protected information, and maybe that person was there for a certain reason and they didn't want people to know why they were in the hospital. And then Molly also has a story too of a time that her friends were maybe not being the best of friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So on a previous study I worked on related to athletic concussions that was partnered with UT, I had friends that were football fans and UT in general fans. And so if I got any athletes injured, which happened to be during football season or things like that, and I was going in to do assessments, my, now ex-friends, because it's not cool to violate HIPAA, but they would pressure me to release which athlete I was going to see, especially because UT athletics and UT football can be highly followed, I guess. But anyway, so just peer pressure of things like that, or it's just not necessary to release any sort of information about patients, because if the circumstances were flipped, you wouldn't want people releasing information about you.
So as a reminder, we're using that Google form while we're screening patients. And this is a great way Dr. Osier can have our backs after. If we're filling out the form, we're proving why we did have reason to be in the chart. Whereas if you're not filling out that form and the Compass system has you marked that you opened a chart, but you didn't fill out the form, then Dr. Osier has no way of explaining whenever we're contacted by the HIPAA police. Bailey was in that chart because they were potential patient for our study. She got out of it as soon as she noticed that they actually didn't have a brain injury or whatever the case might be. That Google form is kind of our timestamp as to why you're in that chart. So it's really important to be filling that out, and don't forget to press submit anywhere along the way in the form whenever maybe you keep going all the way to the end because they did meet the inclusion criteria, or maybe you have to stop somewhere within the form because you realize they didn't meet the criteria. Just make sure to press submit so that we have that record and Dr. Osier can have your back. And don't forget to use the need to know language, sharing the minimum amount of PHI possible to get the job done. An extra little special thing, Claire just kind of briefly mentioned it, and we might not come upon it. It's really not that common, but it's called NFP, or not for publication. It's kind of an extra special guard over a specific patient, and it can sometimes be because they're famous or they just really want things to be extra private, or it might be a safety issue like victim protection. It just means that not only, of course, is it the normal HIPAA deal, but if somebody comes and they're like, "Hi, my son is here. I came to bring him a box of cookies. Can you tell me what room he's in? I'm trying to find his room." If somebody's NFP, the answer would be, "I cannot confirm or deny that patient's here." But for us, that really shouldn't even be applicable for us. If somebody comes to you asking where a patient is, regardless of if the patient's NFP or not, we're not necessarily the giver of that news because we're just there with nursing research. So regardless of the situation, you should probably just send them to maybe the volunteer desk or the front desk or the nurse's station and just be like, "Hey, you should ask them. I'm just here with nursing research, so that's not really information I'm comfortable sharing." And then if the patient's NFP, they'll deal with it themselves. And if they're not, then you still did the right thing. So keep in mind your role.
All right, so this slide just kind of goes over things that could happen if you do violate HIPAA. You can have civil penalties, you can have criminal penalties, and something that's pretty interesting to me is the first row is you didn't even know that you violated HIPAA. So even doing it on accident, you can have up to a $50,000 fine or a year in jail by just on accident. But with this training, you will be well versed in not violating HIPAA, and before it even gets to this point, you would contact Dr. Osier and she would help you navigate the system. But just mainly like for your information, there are real consequences to violating HIPAA.
And like Molly said, there are some real consequences to violating it. And so some individual consequences to that could include losing your opportunity to participate in educational programs. So for one thing, like if it was a really if it was like multiple HIPAA violations, or if it was like a really bad one or something, like you might not be able to go to Del Seton anymore, or not Del Seton, Del Children's for this study. You could also lose professional license. So I know a lot of us are like still in undergrad and stuff, but you could lose the opportunity to become a nurse or a doctor or a PA or whatever that is because they saw that you violated this. You could also be subject to criminal conviction, including like being charged and going to jail. It could also be fined, like on the previous slide Molly was saying, with some of those really big fines. Also be subject to a civil suit. So we really want to make sure that a HIPAA violation does not ruin our young budding careers, as Nicole would say.
So these are some resources for you. If you think you might have violated HIPAA, even if it was on accident, the best thing to do would be to start with calling Dr. Osier. She's very forgiving. She's not going to be mad at you. She's going to help you navigate what to do. You can also call directly the Seton hotlines, but my recommendation would be to start with Dr. Osier, and she'll work with you side by side to get this worked out. But don't be scared. She's very forgiving.
All right, and so just real quick, things to never do. Never write down PHI on any sort of surface, sticky note, things like that. Don't ever remove PHI from the hospital. Claire went over the special bins that are locked that will be shredded. And same thing, don't print PHI. It's just really not necessary for our study. Don't tell your friend that the Jonas Brothers were at the DCMC ED or any sort of famous person. Don't leave your laptop out while you go grab coffee, or use the function that Bailey went over, the roam function. And let's see, don't put data from your chart onto a flash drive or hard drive. That, again, is just not necessary for our study, and it has the risk of being lost or stolen. Don't open a chart if it's someone that's too young or too old for our study. So our study is 6 to 12 years old, so a 4-year-old, you wouldn't want to open their chart. Don't open the chart if their reason for admission doesn't suggest that they have a TBI or a traumatic brain injury. Don't open a chart of a family or friend or someone that goes to your church that you just know. And then continue to look in the chart don't continue to look in the chart once you find an exclusion criteria. Once you find that, you can close the chart. They're no longer eligible for our study.
All right, and then things that you always want to do is you want to make sure that you closely pre-screen the patient census that you have access to, and make sure you're looking for eligibility based on the criteria for this study. You want to make sure to carefully screen the patients to confirm that they have all the inclusion criteria and none of the exclusion criteria. Whenever you are looking at your laptop, you want to make sure to log out. You want to get out of that chart whenever you find any excluders, and you want to log out of the computer if you are done screening for the day, or if, like Bailey said, if you are needing to go to the bathroom or go get lunch, you can log out or hit the roam function so that you can get back on the screen that you were on. You want to make sure to fill out the screening form so that if you do go into a chart that you later find out has exclusion criteria, or you want to see if they are a potential candidate that we can use, you really want to make sure to figure that out. And remember to hit submit. That's one of the things that the submit button isn't quite as obvious whenever you're filling this out. So you really want to make sure that when you're done filling out the form, you go to the bottom and you hit the submit button, because otherwise all the information you typed in will not be sent to Dr. Osier. You want to avoid verbally stating PHI in the clinical site. So no talking about in the elevator like Bailey was talking about earlier. Don't talk about in the cafeteria. Do not, list all the patient's PHI if you're on the phone with Dr. Osier, none of that. You want to dress and act professionally when at DCMC. We want to make sure that when we are with the staff and with the patients, we want to make sure that we do look professional, and because we want them to, take us seriously and participate in our study. And if we come in wearing our sweatpants and we look like we aren't really ready to take on the day, then they might question us. And we also want to err on the side of caution when it comes to medical records. Again, no opening charts that we shouldn't be in for any reason. Make sure to take your computers and papers with you to the bathroom/coffee shop. Yeah, we do not want to leave. For one thing, you shouldn't be writing PHI on papers anyways, but you shouldn't be leaving it out where other people can see it, and to make sure we do not leave the laptop out in the open where other people can see it or possibly steal it. We need to report any potential HIPAA violations to Dr. Osier as soon as possible, because she might be getting contacted by Seton saying, why was one of your research volunteers in this chart? And then she can back you up and say, this is why. And she can make sure that you do not have any punitive actions taken against you. And then always remember that Dr. Osier believes in you. She really wants all of us to succeed, and she really wants to make sure that we get some good patients for this study, and that you guys are doing a good job with everything that you're helping out with. And she greatly appreciates all that you guys are doing. So I think that just about wraps it up. And yeah, we want to thank you guys for listening to us. Molly and Bailey, do you have anything left to say?
I was just going to remind people of Claire worked really hard to make some practice quizzes regarding HIPAA. So after you finish listening to this, please take the time to do those. They're really helpful. They go through the Google form that you'll be using for it, so you'll get practice and get familiarity with how it works. You'll remember to press submit like we reminded you. And it just really helps with understanding how it's going to look when you actually get in there and do it. So Yay, Claire, she worked really hard on this.
Okay, great. Thanks for listening.